La protección de diseños industriales como estrategia competitiva en la industria deportiva, del calzado a los equipamientos de alto rendimiento. Cairo Jennings, Intellectual Property Attaché para Mercosur, Gobierno de los Estados Unidos. Estados Unidos. Leonardo Cordeiro, socio en Gruenbaum, Possinhas y Teixeira, Brasil. Moderadora, Montserrat Puente, consejera en Ferrere Abogados, Paraguay.
Hola. Ahí está. Bueno, buenas.
Good afternoon to everyone. Thank you for coming in, and this is the last panel for today. We would like to thank you for the effort after lunch and after these several intense days of being here in Paraguay. And to close the panel and the academic portion, I would like to thank everyone for coming to Paraguay, and I hope that you felt welcome, that you felt at home. And to close the program, we will focus on a subject that converges strategic innovation and legal protections. We have two super panelists here. I'll tell you that Cairo will be speaking in English, so if anyone needs interpretation, translation, you have the headsets available in the back of the room. And a brief summary from Cairo. Cairo is the intellectual protection attaché for Mercosur. He is based in Rio de Janeiro, so I'm quite envious of him. He lives in Rio. He's the main responsible person for the U.S. Embassy and Consulate in the region, and also he collaborates in all issues regarding the protection of intellectual property. Cairo works in close collaboration with companies to protect the interests in the region and coordinates with the government of the United States of America. A very important point that all of us should know is that Cairo played football when he was little. He played the real football. He played soccer at the YMCA of Houston, and his team was called the Scorpions. And generally, they didn't go so well on the scoreboard, but Cairo still told us that at the end of each season, they had a pizza party, so the effort was always rewarded. Leo here is Flamengo before anything else. Flamengo, Brazilian, amateur boxer, football fan. He has been assisting ASIPI meetings for some years now. He works in industrial design. He is an expert witness related to patent and design, current president of the Patent Commission and industry secrets from ASIPI, and coordinator for the Brazilian Association of Intellectual Property Agents. So, Cairo.
Well, good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be with you. You know, we're headed into the World Cup in just about a week in North America, so this is a very opportune time to talk about intellectual property and its connection to sports. I know that's been the topic of all these panels, and I've really enjoyed listening. Today we're going to talk about industrial designs. Before I start, I think I should address the elephant in the room, the elefante en la sala. the United States and Paraguay are scheduled to play one another in about 10 days. And I just want to make it very clear from the outset that from the USPTO's perspective, we are rooting for IP owners to win over counterfeiters. That is our primary focus right now. So best of luck to both teams. I'm going to be giving a very brief overview of industrial designs and then pivot to discuss broader forms of IP that are involved in sporting events. And then finally, we will conclude with a brief case study of the Super Bowl, which is the largest sporting event in the United States. My colleague Leo, who is a boxer, I didn't know that, careful, but Leo is going to go into details about industrial designs in the region. I think that from a practical standpoint will be very important for you. So let's just have fun. This is just sort of a brief overview of IP in the United States. I guess from the outset I should mention that industrial designs are a bit peculiar in the United States. And that's because we actually protect our industrial designs through our patent system, which no other countries in Latin America do. I believe in Latin America you have an individual right, property right known as an industrial design. In the United States we actually have design patents. And what that means is that a lot of the scrutiny and examination you're going to have in the United States is going to be a bit higher than if you're filing an industrial design in other jurisdictions. And that's because examiners are not just going to look at the functional requirements. They're not just going to look at novelty. Is there a single prior art reference that reads on this new ornamental design? They're actually going to go all the way to non-obviousness. They're going to ask the question, would a designer having skill in designing these articles have seen this as an obvious design? So I think the barrier to getting an industrial design registered in the United States, a design patent, is higher. And that is a bit discouraging. It means it's going to be a little more costly, a little more complicated, but it also means that if you secure a design patent, it's going to be pretty strong. You're going to have some confidence that it stands out from the prior art. Here we have some examples in sports. Of course, we have sportswear like the Nike shoe. We have golf clubs. The amount of innovation in golf is really remarkable. It shows you where the money is in sports. You have, of course, apparel, and that's an American football helmet. So design patents are going to protect ornamental designs. And the key, of course, is that you cannot protect anything that is functional. And we'll talk a little bit at the end about functionality, but functionality is really going to go to the question of, is there something that goes to utility in this design patent? Is it something that increases performance or has a direct impact on performance in a positive way? Or does it affect the manufacture of the article? Does it make it much cheaper, much faster to manufacture? And I think if the answer to those questions is yes, then be prepared. You're going to probably have a more complicated examination. That's design patents. While we're on the topic of patents, I can talk about utility patents for inventions. I have here a pretty old one from 1908. This is an American baseball glove. This invention was a novel way to do stitching in the glove, so it protected the hand and it held up longer under competition. And then on the right, we have a historic glove that's, of course, an embodiment of this invention, and it's signed by Babe Ruth. If you know American baseball, Babe Ruth was probably one of the most famous baseball players. He was called the Sultan of Swat because he used to swat the ball really, really far. And this glove, a few years back, sold for over $1.5 million. So another example of how much money is in sports. People are really passionate about it. Utility patents, I think, are really fun in sports because, you know, consumer goods are always competing with one another in the marketplace. But sporting goods are so unique because the innovations go directly to performance. And when you're competing, small improvements are extremely valuable. If you're trying to shave off a few seconds, you're trying to increase performance just a tiny bit, you're going to see a tremendous amount of innovation in that space. So here's an example of hockey patents. I thought I'd do some ice sports since that's a bit, I guess, exotic in the region. So in hockey, you know, it's a tiny puck. It moves very quickly and it can seriously injure you. So that's why there's all these innovations in protective gear, gloves and helmets, and in the hockey stick itself. And to continue on the ice sports theme, I like this slide because it shows a remarkable development over 170 years of figure skates. So you can see all the way back in 1860, there was a shoe skate that allowed people to walk and then remove a part and be able to skate and not damage their blades on their skates. And then in the early 1900s, designers started to understand the biomechanical function of the foot, and they started to develop inventions around that. In the 70s, it was a lot more about high performance, so new materials, new shapes, some of them with computer-assisted design to get new inventions. And then more recently, kind of combining all this together, performance, elegance, all this into an invention. So kind of fun to see the way that this plays out. Pivoting to trademarks. Now, of course, we're very familiar with trademarks of our famous sports teams. You have your word marks and your logos. There are also non-traditional trademarks. So trade dress, of course, are 3D trademarks. So these are actual product marks themselves. And the challenge with 3D marks, trade dress, is that product designs cannot, in and of themselves, be distinctive. And to prove that you have protectable trade dress, you must prove acquired distinctiveness, that consumers in their minds have come to associate this particular design with a particular source of manufacture. Here are some examples of that. We have Callaway's golf ball, which looks kind of suspiciously like a soccer ball to me. You have the Chuck Taylor All-Star basketball shoe, tremendous number of trade dress in the shoe apparel market. The particular location of the label, the eyelets, the striping on the shoe all go to that immediate customer recognition that this comes from an all-star shoe. A more recent one is interesting to me because there is some functionality in it. This water bottle from Mobot actually has on the outside of it a particular foam pattern, and there is some functionality. It can be used in sports massage. But they were able to get the trade dress because they showed that there are many different ways to get a sports massage. The patterns can vary, and this is a unique pattern that consumers have come to associate with their particular water bottles. So I thought that was an interesting thing. And my favorite is the Zamboni ice machine. As a kid, if you're ever at an ice rink in the US or Canada, and you see the Zamboni come out, you'll hear kids scream, "Zamboni, Zamboni," because it's a cute machine, and there's a guy who drives it from the back. I think it's made to attract little children. And they got an actual trade dress for the Zamboni machine, which is remarkable because if you think about a machine, it's fit for purpose. Surely there's a lot of functionality there, but they were able to show that actually, indeed, there are some unique design elements that don't go to functionality and are useful in that respect. And yeah, examiners are going to be looking very much at functionality. So again, if you want to get protection, you need to show that the particular embodiment is not, the particular design here of trade dress is not in some way necessary. So that could be necessary for function, necessary for the cost of manufacture. The best case scenario is you can actually show that it performs worse. If you can say, oh, it's actually more expensive, which in trade dress, you know, a lot of times there's extra steps in the manufacturing process to add an extra label, to add a stripe that's not necessary for its performance. And you can show the examiner, actually, it's more costly for us to manufacture. That's powerful proof that you can potentially, against functionality. So the question of functionality exists in both trade dress, 3D trademarks, and in industrial designs, design patents. Similar inquiry there. And finally, on non-traditional trademarks, and this is the last one before we get into our case study, I just note that color can be used. So here we have a color mark owned by Wilson. It says the mark consists of the color red used on substantially the entire outer surface of tennis equipment on bags. So here, just like with trade dress, color obviously cannot be inherently distinctive. You have to show acquired distinctiveness, and Wilson was able to secure that protection. So I think the Super Bowl is a really interesting case study just because in trademark land it's somewhat ancient. You know, you're talking about 1960s where this protection first started. And obviously, this is the largest sporting event in the United States. We'll have to see with the upcoming World Cup whether that will be bigger, but it's a tough one to beat, and I'll tell you why. The Super Bowl was held earlier this year in February, and a 30-second spot for advertising sold for $10 million. I worked that out into local currency in Paraguay. It was about 2 million guaranis. I'm so sorry. About 2 million in your local currency for 1 second. 1 second of, I mean, that's it. 1 second, and that's how much. So really, that's where a lot of money is. So there's a lot of innovation, and there's a lot of desire to protect the trademarks associated with it. The Super Bowl is owned by the National Football League. And what's interesting, I think, about this is, and this is something to keep in mind with your clients, the NFL has really put together a layered strategy. When we talk about a layered strategy, it means that you are looking at every layer of the interaction with the public and you're seeking protection. So you have here a registration for the Vince Lombardi trophy. That's in the upper left-hand corner. This is the trophy itself, the symbol of victory, the icon for victory. So they protect the symbol of the trophy. They protect the event, Super Bowl. That's the actual event on a Sunday, usually in February. And I can just say from private practice, they really, really enforce the Super Bowl. I've been on the receiving end on behalf of clients for a number of demand letters. Typically, when you get that from the NFL, you're a little panicked because the NFL has a reputation of being as brutal on the field as they are in the courtroom when it comes to protecting Super Bowl. Funny enough, they'll allow you to say the big game. So if you ever do advertising, just a heads up, you can say, hey, come buy our potato chips for the big game. But if you say Super Bowl, oh, gosh, God help you. So anyway, that's the actual event. And then they even have of course, they have a registration for their NFL mark, which is, I would say, famous at this point. And they've protected the cultural experience as Super Sunday. So they have multiple layers of protection. And what that does is it really increases the scope of your protection. You know, I think we were talking earlier about ambush marketers. People are always testing the boundaries, right? They're seeing how close they can get so they can get a little bit of your goodwill without actually violating your rights. But if you have this layered strategy, I think it really increases the perimeter. It makes people a little more cautious about getting too close to your trademark rights, and that's a good thing. The game in February was held between two teams, the Seattle Seahawks on the left and the New England Patriots on the right. I just note that these teams have vast portfolios of marks themselves and various forms of IP. For example, the Seattle Seahawks have the registration for the team logo. They also have the team mascot down below, the Seahawk. And they even have this one called Bring on the 12. And the origin of Bring on the 12 is the idea that you want to get your fans involved in the game. So in American football, there are 11 players on the field. So whenever you say the 12th man, Bring on the 12, you're talking about getting the fans involved. And typically, that's to make sure they're very, very loud whenever the opponent is trying to concentrate. I know this is very familiar in your football context, that fans get loud. It's quite possible that your fans are way louder. I've seen some of those videos. But what's interesting here is that there was another owner of a similar trademark, Texas A&M University. It's a college, a university in Texas, and they owned a trademark from 1922 called the 12th Man. And I think this actually came from something that happened where they ran out of players and someone came down from the stands and an actual fan became a football player, which is crazy. I don't think you do that today. You'd probably get a concussion and go to the hospital, but maybe in 1922 you could actually do that. But that's where they protected their mark, the 12th man. And so there was a big lawsuit between these two teams. They settled it, and the Seattle Seahawks pay a licensing fee to Texas A&M University, an example of how teams can coexist through licensing, which we encourage. Similarly, the New England Patriots have a very broad portfolio, just to highlight that, gosh, you know, these marks are used on trading cards, posters, calendars, all manner of apparel, very similar to your football context as well. And the Patriots, I think, very cleverly also have a mark for Forever New England. So they are trying to capture New England, that sense of not patriotism, but loyalty to your region. And so very, very powerful marks. Utility patents are quite fun too. So this utility patent is for a first down marker. So in American football, you're trying to get to the first down. So you're trying to run the ball 10 yards. This is going to get too much, but you run the ball 10 yards, and if you can make 10 yards, you get to start over and try again. You get 4 tries, 4 downs. A down is a try. And so you're constantly trying to make it to this next line until you get to the goal. The problem for people who are viewing the game is you really have no idea where the line is, so it's kind of hard to follow. Until this brilliant invention, which is just in my lifetime. I remember when this was invented, and it really changed the way that you watched football, American football. And so you could see it was a first down graphical indicator into a live broadcast on a football game. So now you could actually see if the ball made it across that first down. So a great example of innovation through utility patents. Similarly, in the 60s, a great innovation, instant replay. It used to be you really didn't have instant replay. Maybe if you had a team on the ground and they were working very hard, they could splice together some film and they could get you a replay in maybe 15 to 30 minutes. Not super helpful if you're trying to immediately address a controversy. So in 1963, Tony Verna invented instant replay, where you could, within 15 seconds, automatically loop the footage and watch it. Now, of course, that's just part of watching sports. Funny enough, he did not patent this, so it was dedicated to the public. But in 2012, he had another patent, this one for what he called talking replay, where players themselves are able to provide commentary on the replay, which is really cool. And in that patent, which he did file with the USPTO, he cited that prior invention, so he got some credit, at least. And final slide on the Super Bowl, just to mention, of course, don't forget copyrights, not only in the broadcast, but in all sorts of performances. If you watched the Super Bowl, I don't know, but Bad Bunny performed what I would call really a love poem to Latin America. It was quite fun to watch. And this also is a great slide because it really drives home the point that, man, Latin America is doing great. You know, y'all are punching above your weight when it comes to music in particular. I think Latin music is the latest craze all through the United States. So great opportunities to advance IP protections for Latin American exports, and would like to see this continue in other places. And with that, I would be delighted for the conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Cairo. Ahora entonces le tenemos a Leo.
Sí, habla acá mismo, sí.
Now we have Leo. Hello, good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here at the ASIPI. It's a great opportunity. Thank you for the ASIPI invitation to talk about this topic. And we have 2 concepts that in my life I truly talk about this. In my daily basis are the industrial licenses and sport. The industrial designs, I always talk about this because in Brazil, since Brazil signed the AIA, we are part of this. I was always working with the patent office in Brazil, trying to look how important this will be for us, how Brazil could get any advantage being part of AIA. And after that, we need to change all the highlight, all the reference that we have, because Gaia has their own rules. And sport, I'll always looking at the design issues, and my idea is to present you how the industrial design may be a solution in South America. And sometimes I have a love or hate moment with design because we always have the best solution from this. So about sport, this is my team, Flamengo. I don't know if you know this team, this club, football club. And Sunday we were in there in the Museum of the Conmebol, and I think that a great part of Flamengo is in the museum. So I live Flamengo. I breathe through the Flamengo club for all the reason, for the Maracanã, for watching the games, and Brazil, of course. I'm a fan of Brazil but I'm more fan from Flamengo than the Brazil Federation, and I also enjoy boxing. This is a way to take out the stress of the design work, or as well of the stress that Flamengo bring to me. These are some pictures that I say that I am a big, huge fan for football. All pictures from ASIPI from the last 10 years. I don't know if any of you are still here. I don't have your copyright for your images, but I will ask you after presentation. So, talking about this topic, the first point that I believe that is important to clarify what is the real difference as sport product in the market, the technology or design. This is a key point, and I'm going to look at a very practical example that is a sports shoe. Why we are wanted to buy this, if we want to have this footwear in a career, because this technology will allow us to have the best results in our career, and this both of them, because this is one of the main topics on the challenge from the legal protection. And now we are talking about sport, but the sport industry is important because we want a product for what we are wearing. For example, a brand of a glove, but it's not will give you a good sport result. This sport brand, so you see that this is a beautiful design, but it does not have the necessary technology. So the question is, how do we protect this? What is the best path to protect this, to have this legal protection in sport? So we have in many sporting good functionality and appearances that are practically inseparable. And how we protect the functionality and the technology into this. And we do not have in South America, as in USA, this design patent. So we need to understand the strategy, how to create this difference. So industrial design are in the middle of brands, a tri-dimensional brand and a utility model. And the concept is no longer what is today the product. Today, a design have a brand, a branding, a different aspect that I enjoy or look into this. It has an identity, has the customer experience, and as well innovation. A lot of design, the industrial design today are profitable not for the design, but for the technology. So our idea is how we should look, and mainly in the sports industry, the design industry, as a development strategy for two big challenges. First, the duration of the design in South America are different. In Argentina is 15 years max of the jurisdiction or entry in force. In Chile is 15 years old. So if I have a strategy for an international strategy to present to a country, to have the priority to use this as a strategy, I will have an amount of years in a country and different in another country in Latin America. So this is not going to bring the protection that I truly want. So the answer is no. Today, the design normally is protected with other kinds of joint or simultaneously. In this sport industry, a single product can be simultaneously have a patent, functional, ornamental, or trademark protection. But sometimes we are missing the importance of the design in the world. I'm talking in the worldwide as well in Europe, but now we are talking about South America, and this is a point that I think that we need to organize the terms or the expiration of the design patents. All of the patents are usually 20 years, or you can make this renovation or renewal. So I think that we need to start thinking about this grace period of renewal. The second and most important is if we have this substantive review before an award is granted. So I tried to do a coverage around all the countries. We have Brazil, no, Argentina, no, Colombia, partial or limit. We need to request this. I have the concession of a design with prior systemic examination on novelty and originality, but in other countries, no. In Brazil, I need to request this prior systemic examination, and in Mexico, that include a background examination. So we need to have a similar program view in Latin America to understand how to present. I think that we are not taking or giving this importance to the intellectual property in the sport industry. They are fundamental because if they are not part of this, we will not have any protection. So this is a summary that in Latin America, they have their distinction into the essential registration system and as well on time. Talking about Brazil, in the Brazilian system, we have 3 important points. First, the absence of the merit exam. If us in Brazil, we present an industrial design and does not undergo a prior substantive examination, and when we have this concession, is okay to start a complaint or to file, or I can present a complaint against an infraction. And as well, we need to request these merit exams. So we need to go back to the Office of Industrial Design in Brazil and request them to prepare this substantive examination. And we are still does not have a clear the database. We do not have. We have 5 days, but we do not have the results. And sometimes they give you in the database the report that they have merit or not. We do not have this registration function that will be obviously or for the discrimination. Another important point is separation between functionality and ornamentation. And it's not always easy to separate what is the true protection of the development. If we have a design that does not have functionality, is artwork, and we need to go for protection for copyright of intellectual property. All the designs that have an industrial application, all of this has an industrial function. And to be able to have this, we need to have a functionality that eliminates the ornamental freedom. This glass does not have any function, but they need to have a design. This glass needs to have a design so the water does not fall. It's not the main function, because our main function will be the protection for the utility model. This is a point that I consider is fundamental, that Brazil, that has a dark vision or not unclear or an unclear vision, we cannot have an answer about this separation between functionality and ornamentation. And last, but today the industrial design Brazil is part of the brands, and the IP from Brazilian office is not that criticism, but the vision of the requirement for novelty for a brand is not the same for the design. The design, it needs something that is unique in the world, so brand does not yet change. Perhaps they are denying or approaching into this design, industrial design. So these 3 points are the daily problems they have in Brazil to have the protections. We want to do efforts to have a solution, but we do not know if we are going to have results. In 2023, Brazil had the accession to the high system. We were for years looking if this is going to be interesting. We have the Mexico reference that's signed in 2020. This happened the same thing in Brazil. They don't have the high system as an interest point for export. We export in Brazil, and when we import, we do not use high system as a reference. And the number of requests increased for high system in Brazil, but without having all the prosecution or all the step-by-step that we have in Brazil for requests that come from AIA or from the hay system, and at the end you have the concession, or perhaps you do not have any Brazilian or company supporting this request, and then you have the concession, and we do not know what's the function of this design in Brazil. This does not create any impact. Any global companies use hay in Brazil, and we were thinking, why are we signing this international agreement? We know that we sign a lot of this, and we need to understand if this is important for intellectual property, not because there are policies or politics involved that we need to sign this system with the ones who handle intellectual property in South America. We need to support or show what is the true benefits to sign or to access to an agreement just to be part of this. So Brazil now is part of this hay system. We are still walking into this. In October, we will complete 3 years to be part of member of the hay system, and we do not see an important impact. Now, returning with the sport, this design was presented by Puma's industrial design registration for the Copa America 2024. It was presented, this design for a ball. Everyone may think that this is the form of a balloon. Why? It is a common shape. You cannot protect this, but we are not protecting the tridimensional form, but the bidimensional. This brand represents the lines that are the featuring 16 lines represents the total number of the participant South America countries, from the American countries. So it's possible to do this as a design, yes, because in here it's not the form or the shape of the project. It is the design, the pattern that they are putting into this product. We were talking yesterday with Martin from the patent committee in Argentina. The industrial model is one thing, and industrial design is something different, but they all have protection as a design. So we need uniformity.
Que esta primeira, que está oscura, seria uma anterioridade. Se apresentou a CIA, isso aí não há nenhuma funcionalidade, nós estamos pensando nisso, é somente a ornamentalidade. E depois de apresentada, alguém apresentou uma nulidade, que é esta que está fora, e é exatamente a mesma coisa. Pero as funções de como abrir e cerrar a CIA é distinta. Pero isso não se protege em design, isso se protege em modelo de utilidade. Este desenho foi nulo porque quem buscou a proteção buscou o caminho equivocado. Deveria apresentar por modelo de utilidade e não por desenho industrial. Por último exemplo, esta camisa, isso foi exatamente porque, como falou por la mañana Elisângela, nós tuvimos em Brasil 3 momentos de lei especiais por tema de eventos deportivos, que foi o Mundial 2014, as Olimpíadas 16 e agora o Mundial Feminino 2027, onde temos regras que cambiam pouco a lei para que seja fast track, que todos os temas que estejam vinculados a deporte.
Our decision, and in 2014 FIFA presented the same thing in that for content. If the classification was in the code, we could fast track it and get it out in 5 days. So all the selection from the world, all the signatures, all firms presented their designs in Brazil, and it was conceded to everyone. We're not just protecting the blue of the shirt. This, for example, on the left is from Italy, where it's not the color, it's the shape of the jersey. The ornamentals on the back, the cut in the back is larger than the cut in the front. So having lines in the center, those are strategies that we can think about. But sometimes it's difficult to understand that this is the best path to get protection for the industrial design, and that is a path for this. An idea was to take advantage of the sports topic to talk about that, but also conclude that design is not just a secondary right. Oh, I have design, I have a patent, I'll look for design. No, that we have protections that can only be successful if they are a protection for industrial design, but that needs. The sports industry uses this a lot, and this adds value. It creates an identity. It creates an immediate difference because the team jerseys are. They're very similar. You change the logo, sometimes the sponsor's brand, the colors may be the same. If you remove all of that, they look exactly the same. So the idea is that in this Latin American forum, we can together think about how design should come up with a solution in our countries and bring solutions, not problems. That's the conclusion that I get to. In many sporting goods, the consumer doesn't perceive the boundary between functionality and design, and that's precisely where we have to stop, think, and look for the best path forward. Thank you very much for your time. And the idea was to do this connection between design and sports. Thank you very much, Leo. Thank you for your examples. I always like to see pictures and graphics and to understand what we're talking about. Now we have an open space. If you have any questions, way over there it seems. Fabri, the first volunteer.
Gracias.
Thank you. I'm sorry for this question, but I can't help myself. Well, first of all, I would like to congratulate you for a very clear and truly, it was truly challenging what Leo talked about, the issue of legislation in Latin America. And my question is aimed towards that. Keeping in mind the differences of legislation for the protection of industrial designs in Latin America, what do you think are the main obstacles that you come up against as sporting companies when you try to protect your products in the different countries? And what do you think would be the strategies to maximize that protection? Obviously, we cannot talk about a harmonization, but what solutions could we have? Well, first, sometimes I see that it's not being used as a solution because it makes things worse. But in many cases, I see that they try to protect the ornamentality through a patent, and that is where they lose because they limit the shape over function, and then you get if you get a lawsuit, you're not protecting the ornaments on the products. Sometimes you go through having too much time thinking about what strategy will be used. It's important. When I talk about harmonizing concepts, I'm not talking about the South American design. This isn't the idea because these are different things. Each country has its own rules, but keeping minimum similar concepts like as validity and the exams being applied, that is the same. That is similar to having a patent in the United States. But first of all, I don't think that design is used as the best path forward, but when they use it, they are protecting parts that are not the best. For example, trying to protect design through trademark, you're restricting yourself to a certain area instead of having protection on all qualifiers. But I don't have an exact answer, but I think that we have to always work together, mainly with sports. You have your in-house people that know about IP. You have to look for the strategies closest to perfection, always being very clear. Every country has its rules. Everyone has their protection models. Design can be used. That's why I talked about, I said that this is a love-hate relationship for me because sometimes I go down this road and it doesn't end up like I wanted. So you have to work with them and try to come up with the best strategy possible. Any other questions?
I think Leo's right. If you're a practitioner, you really need to focus on the question of functionality. I think that's true in Latin America. It's true in the United States. And, you know, as lawyers, I was in private practice for many years, it's sometimes the flow of work is so intense that you don't stop to really ask your client the questions that need to be asked. And really the value that you as attorneys, that we as attorneys bring is understanding and having those questions. So when you receive applications of various kinds, to ask what are the functional aspects of this. And the nice thing about sports is people care a lot about utility, about functionality, more so I think than in any other product. And so if you ask the right questions and you really get to understand how this product was designed, you can really dig down to what are the functional ramifications of this design. And that will help you from a strategy decide whether it's appropriate to get an industrial design, whether it's appropriate to do a trademark or something else. So I think, yeah, functionality needs to be a real gateway question when you're talking to your clients.
I would like to just, basing myself on what Leo said, many times you can't use design, and it's even worse if you don't use it, and also the lack of harmonization. I would like to talk about, or state that there is a working group that's called Strategic Design that's working on that topic, trying to create that harmonization or improvements in legislation, and with collaboration of the design committees. And following that line, tomorrow we are organizing alongside DNAPI an event at DNAPI from 10 to 12 a.m. and we will talk about Francisco Morello will be there from Adidas. He'll tell us about the experience from one brand, and we will talk about the European experience, and we will have a local designer as well. You're all invited, and if you want to go, and we're going to deal with those topics, legislation improvement and harmonization, and try to foster or invite people to use this tool in the region. Thank you. Perfect, Matthias. It's important sometimes to think that harmonization amongst countries, having a single line on how we protect, sometimes it depends on the offices to understand the function of design, and many times that's not clear. I'm talking about Brazil. Sometimes we have a group of coordinators, directors, and in the Brazilian office that is, and it's becoming more clear what the function of the industrial design is. Our law, we're carrying out an event in Brazil to celebrate, quote unquote, the 30 years of this Brazilian law. And I don't have much to celebrate about that. I can say that we should change it. We have projects, a lot of bills to change it, but we have to be very clear. What's the function of the office? How do we protect the design? What are the guidelines? We have to go down the same road together. Brazil, that's a giant country that has a bunch of designs that have been presented. Last year we received 10,000 being presented. I don't know if that's normal or not, but perhaps through a Hague system that may mitigate for that. But Brazil is very clear on, everyone has to be clear on how they protect Brazil, Argentina, and other countries. Now the office understands, yes, we can, the design committee from ASIPI can talk to everyone, and then we can look for harmonizing this in interpretation and not having, maybe we don't have clear laws, but it's fundamental that we know that the committee is working on this and that tomorrow they will have this panel here in Asunción. Any other questions?
Hola, gracias.
Hello, thank you for the presentation is very good. My question is for Cairo, so I'll make the question in English.
These days, all about ambush marketing, right? So as the FIFA World Cup this year is going to be in the United States, I'd like to know if, do you see the industrial design rights playing a meaningful role in combating the ambush marketing and unauthorized merchandise alongside with trademarks? Or if you do so, can you give me an example? And also, if Leo has any example from Brazil, si crees que hay algún ejemplo.
Do you think there are any examples of industrial design in Brazil that will combat ambush marketing in the 2014 Cup? Do you see it? Maybe it's difficult. I don't know if you could answer that, but maybe you have an example of this.
I think, and this is something that FIFA is great about and the Super Bowl is great about when you've got these big events, it's about the layered approach that we discussed. So industrial designs, design patents in the US, industrial designs elsewhere is a very important piece of the layered protection. And I really do think layering protection is really about putting competitors on notice. Now, a lot of the ambush marketing stuff is either unique to a particular law that's been passed. I know there's different laws in the region here for that, or it's contractual obligations. But if we're talking about just IP, having that layered approach really increases the defensiveness concerns that people have. So, you know, if you can get additional protection for things like industrial designs with design patents in the US, you should absolutely do that, because the more protections you have, the broader, the greater the perimeter. And I used to counsel clients all the time, and like I said with Super Bowl, if a client came to me and wanted to get clever and say, I have this great idea to somehow associate myself with the Super Bowl without actually saying it, I would be like, hey, listen, no, my Italian staff always do this. Don't do that. It's a bad idea. And I think if you have that strategy to build that perimeter, then you'll also scare off the ambush marketers to say, you know, let's try another event, not this one.
Sí, a veces ambush market es tan...
Sometimes it's so easy to look at something and say, that's ambush marketing. And something is so complex and you can't, it's difficult to understand. And maybe something happened with the design. And I don't remember an example right now. But in 2014 in Brazil, there were a lot of cases. And now I remembered one. It's not about design, but it's very interesting. And FIFA doesn't allow World Cup, FIFA, some official names that the rights belong to FIFA. And Brazil, a group of journalists started a newspaper that will be called That Championship. They won't say World Cup. They'll say this game, the game that's played by the yellow. So it'll be like a satire. But for me, that is ambush marketing, because they will use all the details, all the days, the dates, the references, but they won't speak the keywords that they can't speak. So I think that something went through design in that matter. I'm not sure, but if I remember, I'll let you know. I also have a question for both of you, and it's about if you believe that if we need a different strategy when we are dealing about the sports industry, if we need to have a different strategy since we are combining performance, aesthetics, technology, but also the perception of the audience and the passion of the audience. For me, sports is very associated to, let me tell you about in fact, my father was the president of the Cerro Club. Cerro is one of the largest football clubs in Paraguay, so my house was always about football. It's painted in red and blue, the colors of the club. People can't come in if they're dressed in black and white, the rival club's color, so it's like a mortal sin. So football is passion. So keeping all of that in mind, if you truly have to have a different strategy when we're talking about the sports industry, or do you focus on it just like if it were any other industry?
Funny story as well. I was in D.C. with my children not too long ago, Washington, D.C., and we went to a big cemetery where there were lots of graves. And, you know, you walk through and you see the graves, and it's interesting what people put on their grave. Lots of crosses, of course, some Jewish Stars of David, symbols that have tremendous power. And we walked by this large headstone that had the Washington Redskins. They had the helmet and they had the... So I was trying to explain to my kids, yeah, some people, it's sort of like a religion for them, their sports team. And you don't see that in any other sector. You know, no one is putting Nike on their gravestone, just do it, you know? So it is really unique in that respect. And as far as strategy, I think that that's a conversation with your clients. So if you're involved in securing registrations, you know, we all have those conversations, those important and sometimes difficult conversations with clients who want to manage legal fees, they want to manage filing fees. They're like, is it worth it to enter this market? I don't know. But when it comes to something that's so passionate, and if you're ever involved in building a brand of a sporting franchise, I think you need to really put that in context and say, look, it's a very small investment over the course of, one day people will put this on their headstones, So I think that definitely it's a bit easier maybe to convince clients that it's worth it to go for maybe more protection, and maybe don't try to save pennies, centavos on that.
Thank you. Leo?
Yo pienso que es un mercadeo.
I think that is a very sensitive market for a very complicated topic that is social. As you said, it is a passion, and as you said, the kids are involved, and the kids want to buy and use the brands, and sometimes they do not have the money enough to buy the original product, so they are searching their path to buy a copy or a resemble. So this is a market that doesn't want to share with the imitation, but we need to understand how we teach a kid that the only chance that they have to use the Brazil T-shirt is a fake copy, and they never see from their parents at school that this is bad. So I think that many of these had occasional job to try to show the importance to not use something that is a piracy, a copy, or a counterfeiting, a counterfeit product for the deceit that could be being into the person. But I think this is something very difficult for this market because you need to live with this. And sometimes the people say, I don't want this. They remove all of this, they resist, and they burn. But it's a different topic as you see your product as a counterfeiting. But into a kid of 7 years old, sometimes you need to be more patient into this. First, congratulations for this panel. This is very interesting, very clear. I'm very happy to see Leonardo, a Flamengo fan. But I want to remember as well, we are talking about ambush marketing, and this is a topic that we are talking about this. But it's good to remember as well that we need to have, and we need to remember the creativity. So we have our opportunity margin as well. For example, having a monopoly of determined brands, and we do not encourage the creativity. I mean, I represent brands in Brazil like Coca-Cola that are great players. But we are not against ambush marketing, but there's a lot of different position from brands that they come, the ones that Leo talked about, as a competitor, a newspaper, something like this, that could be understood into an opportunity framework that does not infringe the third-party rights. But there is a legal consideration, but we need to see the creativity. This is very important in that moment. We have different campaigns that are very interesting, so we remember about the opportunity marketing, that there is not an infraction of the rights, and we are incentivizing other companies to think, to create something innovational, some creative propaganda. There are some good brand activation, sport that are good, and there are others, publicity, that are very bad. But it's just creativity sometimes. But this is just a comment, not a question. That is important that we are talking about repression, limitation, but we need to incentivize the creativity for the marketing agencies, the brands. So it's good to have this competition. Well, this is a limit that in industrial science, when we look these copies, if there are an infraction or not, sometimes the distance, this is a very sensitive area. Sometimes it's an opportunity that never think that this is a right infringement, or there is an opportunity that no one came up with. This is a different product that sometimes they have the register in another office in Brazil. It's not the same, but they find an inspiration to take the same path. So the design is that. to have another path that perhaps is similar but is not? Okay, perfect. Thank you very much, everyone. We are running out of time. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Cairo. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed your panel. And Leo, thank you very much as well. I hope you enjoy the rest of the day in Asunción. I don't know who is now having the microphone. Now we're closing. We are all leaving the room. Well, thank you very much, everyone. Again, thank you. I hope that you enjoy Paraguay, and we hope that you come back soon. So we hope to ASIPI returns to Paraguay soon. Thank you.